June 1944. The beaches of Normandy are still soaked in blood when Supreme Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower receives the report every general dreads: the enemy is regrouping. German Panzer divisions are massing for counterattack. The Allies have a foothold in Europe, but footholds can be crushed. Eisenhower knows that in war, hesitation is death, so he makes a decision that will define the next 11 months of combat. He doesn't order his armies to dig in. He orders them to accelerate. Because in the summer of 1944, Eisenhower understood something the Germans did not. Momentum isn't just a tactical advantage, it's a psychological weapon. And once you have it, you never, ever let go. The morning of June 7, 1944, breaks cold and gray over the Normandy coast. The beaches are silent now, but the silence is deceptive. Scattered across the blood-soaked sand of Omaha Beach lie the broken remnants of the greatest amphibious assault in history. Over 10,000 Allied soldiers have become casualties in just 24 hours. The Atlantic Wall, Hitler's fortress Europe, has been breached, but at a terrible price. In the bluffs above, German artillery crews peer down through the smoke. They know what the Allies don't yet fully grasp: the beachheads are dangerously narrow. Omaha extends barely a mile inland. Utah is even more precarious. These are not secure positions. They are footholds, vulnerable and exposed. And Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox himself, is already moving. His 21st Panzer Division is repositioning for a counteroffensive that could drive the invaders back into the sea. 300 miles away, in a fortified command post near Portsmouth, sits General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of Allied forces in Europe. To the world, he is the architect of D-Day, the man who launched the largest military operation ever conceived. But in this moment, he is simply a man carrying an unbearable weight. In his pocket, folded and creased, is a handwritten note, prepared in case of catastrophe. The troops, the air, and the Navy did all that bravery and devotion to duty could do, it reads. If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine alone. He never had to release that note, but the battle is far from over. Eisenhower faces a brutal choice. Military doctrine suggests consolidation: fortify the beachheads, wait for reinforcements, build overwhelming strength before advancing. It's the safe play, the rational play. But Eisenhower knows something his more cautious advisors don't fully appreciate. Time is the enemy. Every hour the Allies wait is an hour the Germans can use to organize, to reinforce, to prepare a devastating counterstrike. The Wehrmacht is wounded, confused, but not broken. He makes his decision: speed over safety, aggression over caution. Eisenhower orders General Omar Bradley and Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery to push inland immediately, expand the bridgehead, seize the initiative before the Germans can respond with their full might. But then the intelligence reports arrive. German communications, intercepted and decoded, reveal a chilling development. Hitler is moving elite SS Panzer divisions toward Normandy. Heavy armor, veteran crews. The race has begun, and the Allies may already be behind. The fate of Europe now hangs on a simple question: can the Allies break out before the Panzers arrive? Dwight Eisenhower doesn't believe in giving the enemy time to breathe. His strategic philosophy is simple, brutal, and effective: relentless pressure. Keep moving, keep attacking. Never allow the Germans a moment to recover, regroup, or think. In military theory, it's called operating inside the enemy's decision cycle, forcing your opponent to react to your moves before they can execute their own plans. In practice, it means pushing exhausted men beyond their limits, accepting casualties, and betting everything on momentum. And it's working, because the German command structure is already collapsing under its own weight. Adolf Hitler's obsession with control has turned the Wehrmacht into a bureaucratic nightmare. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, Commander-in-Chief West, and Erwin Rommel, commanding Army Group B, are two of Germany's finest military minds. But they can't act without authorization from Berlin. And on the morning of June 6, when the invasion begins, Hitler is asleep. His staff refuses to wake him. Critical hours slip away. By the time Panzer reserves receive orders to move toward Normandy, Allied forces have already torn through defensive positions that could have been reinforced. The Allies exploit this paralysis mercilessly. Eisenhower orders General Omar Bradley's First Army to drive south toward St. Lo, a vital road junction. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery pushes British and Canadian forces toward Caen, a key city that was supposed to fall on D-Day itself. But nothing in Normandy comes easy. The bocage, Normandy's ancient hedgerow country, becomes a killing ground. These aren't ordinary hedges. They're centuries-old earthen banks, 6 feet high, topped with dense brush and root systems that turn every field into a natural fortress. German troops position MG-42 machine guns in hidden emplacements, covering every lane and gap. American infantrymen advance yard by yard, field by field, never knowing where the next burst of fire will come from. Entire squads are cut down in seconds. The casualty rates are staggering. But the advance doesn't stop. Many units have been in continuous combat for 72 hours. They're running on adrenaline, fear, and orders. Sleep is measured in minutes. Ammunition is rationed. Medics work through the night, but Eisenhower refuses to pause. He knows that the moment the Allies slow down, the Germans will consolidate, and consolidation means counterattack. Then comes innovation born from desperation. American engineers, working in makeshift repair depots just behind the front lines, begin welding steel tusks onto the front of Sherman tanks, scrap metal salvaged from German beach obstacles. These improvised blades can cut through the hedgerows like knives through fabric. Troops call them rhino tanks. Within days, dozens are operational. What was impassable terrain becomes penetrable. Fields that took hours to cross now fall in minutes. It's a perfect symbol of Allied adaptability, turning the enemy's own defenses into tools of breakthrough. Eisenhower knows the cost. He sees the casualty reports, but he also knows the alternative. In a message to General George Marshall, he captures the essence of his strategy. The only way to win this war is to make the enemy react to us, not the other way around. And so the pressure continues. Relentless, unyielding, deadly. July 25, 1944. 7 weeks have passed since D-Day, and the Allied armies are still trapped in Normandy. What was supposed to be a rapid breakout has become a grinding war of attrition. Every village is a fortress. Every hedgerow hides a machine gun nest. Progress is no longer measured in miles. It's measured in yards, purchased with blood. The German defenders, dug in and determined, have turned the bocage into a maze of death. But Dwight Eisenhower is done with slow advances. He authorizes Operation Cobra, a plan so bold, so violent, that it could either shatter the German front or collapse into catastrophic failure. The concept is simple in theory, terrifying in execution. Concentrate overwhelming aerial firepower on a narrow sector of the German line west of St. Lo. Over 1,500 American heavy bombers and 400 medium bombers will unleash 4,000 tons of explosives in a single, devastating hour. The objective is to punch a hole through enemy defenses wide enough for armor to pour through, a gap that cannot be sealed. At 9:40 hours, the first wave arrives. The sky darkens with aircraft. The ground trembles. Bombs fall in a cascade of fire and steel, obliterating everything below. German positions vanish in massive eruptions of earth and flame. Entire battalions are vaporized. Communication lines are severed. Command posts collapse. Soldiers who survive the initial blasts are left deaf, disoriented, wandering in shock through a landscape transformed into an apocalyptic wasteland. But war is never clean. The bombing is so intense, so concentrated, that some of it falls short onto American positions. Over 100 Allied soldiers are killed by their own bombs. Among them is Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, the highest-ranking American officer killed in the European theater. The tragedy is devastating, but the German defenses are shattered beyond repair. And then comes George Patton. Flamboyant, profane, and ruthlessly aggressive, Lieutenant General George S. Patton, Jr. believes war is won through speed and audacity. His newly activated Third Army is poised behind the lines, engines running, crews ready. The moment the smoke clears, Patton unleashes his armored columns through the gap like a cavalry charge. Tanks, half-tracks, and infantry carriers surge forward at speeds the Germans can't comprehend. 30 miles in a single day. Then 40. Village after village falls without a fight. Supply lines stretch to the breaking point, but Patton doesn't care. He drives his men forward with relentless fury, refusing to let the enemy recover. German commanders scramble to respond, but they can't. Their communication networks are destroyed. Reinforcements can't reach the front in time. Units are isolated, surrounded, annihilated. For the first time since the invasion, the Allies are moving faster than the Wehrmacht can react. The psychological impact is profound. German morale, already strained, begins to crack. Eisenhower watches the reports flood in. The breakout is working. He sends a calm, measured directive to Omar Bradley, commanding the 12th Army Group, "Keep them moving. Don't let them breathe." The race across France has begun, and the Germans are already losing. August 1944. George Patton's Third Army has swept south and east in a massive arc, turning the German retreat into a rout. But this isn't a withdrawal, it's an encirclement. Tens of thousands of Wehrmacht soldiers, along with their equipment, horses, and vehicles, are now trapped in a shrinking pocket near the town of Falaise. American forces press from the south. Canadian and Polish troops push from the north. The Germans are caught between jaws of steel, and those jaws are closing. What follows is not a battle, it's annihilation. Allied artillery pounds the pocket without pause. Fighter bombers strafe the narrow roads in waves, dropping bombs and napalm on columns packed so tightly that every strike claims dozens of lives. German soldiers abandon their vehicles and flee on foot. Horses scream and collapse in tangled masses. The roads become choked with wreckage, burning tanks, overturned trucks, corpses stacked in grotesque piles. The stench of death is overwhelming. An Allied officer who walks through the pocket days later describes it as a scene from hell itself, a vision of devastation so total it defies comprehension. Dwight Eisenhower visits the site in the aftermath. He walks through the carnage in silence, his face grim. The scale of destruction shakes even him, a man who has ordered thousands into battle, who has calculated losses in terms of divisions and objectives. But he doesn't flinch from the necessity. War, he understands, is not won by mercy or half measures. This is what momentum demands. This is what victory costs. But momentum is not perfect, and the Falaise Pocket reveals its limitations. Despite the overwhelming firepower, not all the Germans are caught. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery's forces, advancing from the north, move too slowly to fully seal the trap. Coordination breaks down. Communication delays cost critical hours. Between 20,000 and 40,000 German troops slip through the narrowing gap before it closes completely. Among them are experienced officers and elite units, men who will regroup, reorganize, and fight again in the battles to come. It's a missed opportunity, a flaw in an otherwise brilliant operation. Eisenhower doesn't dwell on it. He's already looking ahead to the next objective, Paris. But Paris presents a dilemma. The city is symbolically invaluable. Liberating the French capital would be a propaganda triumph, a blow to German morale, a rallying cry for the free world. But it's also a logistical nightmare. 2 million civilians need food, water, medical supplies, and fuel. Diverting resources to Paris could slow the entire Allied advance. Eisenhower's initial plan is clear. Bypass the city, maintain momentum, drive straight for Germany. Then everything changes. French resistance fighters inside Paris launch an uprising against the German garrison. The city erupts in street fighting, and Adolf Hitler issues a chilling order to the German commander. If Paris cannot be held, it must be destroyed. Bridges are to be demolished. Monuments are to be leveled. The city is to burn. Eisenhower makes the call. Paris must be liberated. On August 25, 1944, French and American forces entered the city to jubilant crowds. It's a moment of triumph, a victory for the soul as much as the strategy. But it costs time, it costs resources, and it raises a question that haunts every commander who relies on speed. When does momentum become unsustainable? September 1944. The Allied armies are surging east in a great wave of liberation. In just 3 months, they've torn through France, Belgium, and Luxembourg. Towns and cities that suffered years under Nazi occupation are free. Supply trucks roll through cheering crowds. Soldiers write letters home, convinced the war will be over by Christmas. The momentum seems unstoppable. But Dwight Eisenhower knows the truth. His armies are running on fumes. The logistical reality is brutal. The Allies are advancing faster than their supply lines can keep up. Every gallon of fuel, every bullet, every can of rations has to be trucked hundreds of miles from the beaches of Normandy. The ports closer to the front, Antwerp, Calais, are still in German hands or too damaged to use. George Patton's Third Army, once racing across France at 30 miles a day, is now grinding to a halt. His tanks sit idle out of fuel. Ammunition is rationed. Infantry units go without hot meals for days. The race east is becoming a crawl. Then Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery proposes a solution: Operation Market Garden. It's audacious, risky, and perfectly aligned with Eisenhower's doctrine of relentless pressure. The plan is to drop 3 airborne divisions behind German lines in the Netherlands, seize a series of bridges across major rivers, and hold them long enough for British armored columns to punch through. If it works, the Allies will bypass the heavily fortified Siegfried Line, cross the Rhine, and encircle the industrial heartland of the Ruhr. Germany's war machine would be crippled. The war could be over in weeks. Eisenhower approves it reluctantly. He's skeptical of Montgomery's optimism, wary of the narrow corridor the ground forces will have to advance through. But he also understands the strategic imperative. Momentum must be maintained. The Germans cannot be allowed to regroup. On September 17, 1944, over 35,000 paratroopers drop into occupied Holland. The sky fills with parachutes and gliders. Initial objectives are seized, but almost immediately the plan unravels. Intelligence failures doom the operation before it truly begins. The British 1st Airborne Division lands near Arnhem, only to discover 2 SS Panzer divisions refitting in the area, veteran units that weren't supposed to be there. The lightly armed paratroopers are surrounded, outnumbered, and cut off. The ground offensive, led by the British XXX Corps, advances up a single narrow road, a highway the Germans shell relentlessly. Progress is agonizingly slow. Bridges are blown. Resistance stiffens. The armored column never reaches Arnhem in time. After 9 days of brutal fighting, the surviving British paratroopers are forced to withdraw across the Rhine under cover of darkness. Over 17,000 Allied soldiers are killed, wounded, or captured. The bridge at Arnhem is never taken. Market Garden is a disaster. But even in failure, the operation achieves something. The Germans are forced to commit precious reserves to defend the Netherlands. They cannot launch counteroffensives elsewhere. Eisenhower's doctrine holds. Relentless pressure, even when individual operations fail, keeps the enemy off balance, reactive, and unable to consolidate strength. Eisenhower absorbs the loss without public recrimination. He doesn't blame Montgomery. Instead, he refocuses on the broader strategy: continuous multi-front pressure, where the Germans down through attrition. No rest, no respite. Winter is coming. The Allies are exhausted, their supply lines stretched to breaking. But they are still moving forward, slowly, bloodily, but forward. And in the forests of the Ardennes, the Germans are planning one final, desperate gamble. From D-Day to VE Day is 11 months. June 6, 1944 to May 8, 1945. On a calendar, it's less than a year. But for the men who fought through it, who bled through Normandy's hedgerows, stormed across France, endured the frozen hell of the Ardennes, and finally crossed the Rhine into the heart of Nazi Germany. It feels like a lifetime. Dwight Eisenhower's strategy of relentless momentum came at a staggering cost. Over 200,000 Allied soldiers were killed, wounded, or missing in the European theater after the Normandy landings. Entire divisions were shattered and rebuilt. Young men who landed on the beaches in June never saw the victory in May. The price of speed was measured in blood, exhaustion, and irreplaceable loss. But it worked. Consider the alternative. If Eisenhower had consolidated after D-Day, if he had paused to rest and resupply, the Germans would have fortified the Siegfried Line into an impenetrable barrier. Hitler would have had time to deploy his remaining reserves, to organize a cohesive defense, to turn every river and ridge into another killing ground. The war would have dragged into 1946, perhaps longer. More cities would have been reduced to rubble. More civilians would have starved or died under occupation. The Holocaust would have claimed even more lives. Momentum, as brutal and unforgiving as it was, shortened the war. And in shortening it, Eisenhower saved countless lives. On May 7, 1945, German representatives arrived at Eisenhower's headquarters in Reims, France, to sign the unconditional surrender. Eisenhower does not attend the ceremony personally. He stays in his office, waiting. When the documents are signed, he is summoned to meet the German officers briefly. There is no celebration, no triumphalism. He is exhausted, worn down by the weight of 11 months of decisions, each one a calculation of lives against objectives, speed against sustainability, victory against cost. He returns to his desk and composes a message to the combined chiefs of staff. It is plain, factual, devoid of drama. The mission of this Allied force was fulfilled at 2:41 local time, May 7, 1945. That's all. No grand declarations, no speeches, just the acknowledgement of a task completed. Eisenhower understood something fundamental about war that many brilliant tacticians never grasp. Victory is not won by genius alone. It's won by the willingness to endure, to press forward even when every instinct screams to stop, to accept losses that seem unbearable because the alternative is worse. Momentum became the Allies' greatest weapon not because it was elegant or merciful, but because Eisenhower had the courage to wield it, knowing full well what it would cost. In the days after the surrender, Eisenhower walks through a liberated German town. The streets are choked with rubble. Displaced civilians wander aimlessly, their homes destroyed, their lives upended. The war is over. The killing has stopped. But the peace ahead is uncertain, fragile, and haunted by the devastation left behind. Eisenhower knows the world he fought for is only beginning to take shape. The battles are finished. The mission is complete. But the work of rebuilding, of healing, of ensuring this never happens again, that work will take generations. And it starts now,